Hi, everybody, for this episode of A Guy with a Scarf. I have the pleasure to have with me someone that I've met a long time ago, and I was intrigued by one of their idea, and we'll talk about that later. Josh Walker from Sports Innovation Lab. Ciao, Josh.
Ciao, Carlo. Good to see you, my friend.
Where are you? Are you Colorado in the mountains, ready to ski, or that's the look?
It's getting cold. I'm in Vermont, so those
Oh, wow.
who know New England well know that we have some small hills here, and we have terrible skiing in the winter. But it's definitely getting chilly. Yeah, we have beautiful leaves now. So if you're ready to do some leaf peeping, that now is the time.
Okay, so as I mentioned, I think Josh and the Sports Innovation Lab enter my radar when they were talking about the fluid fan. I wouldn't remember the year, but I think it was still a moment where everybody was talking about, media rights, sponsorship, and maybe technology. And I kind of align with this focus on fans early on in the evolution of our ecosystem. But I think, Josh, you can tell us about you, Sport Innovation Lab, the fluid fan.
Yeah, happy to. I mean, I think the evolution of our company is pretty much mirrored the evolution of the industry. So we started out talking about sports technology. The reason we were called the Sports Innovation Lab was we actually believed at some point we were going to spin up a bunch of different companies to solve the problem for tech and digital innovation for sports. So we started with quantified athlete, a lot of the human wearables, biometrics, and biomechanics stuff. We talked about stadium technology. We talked about the evolution of immersive media within broadcasting. And then we talked about how data was changing the landscape for sponsorship. So we touched all of those areas, but what the clients kept coming back to us and saying is, well, we don't know who our fans are. Mm-hmm. And you didn't need to be a rocket scientist to keep coming back to the same problem, the same issue, which is that sports organizations generally didn't know who their fans were because they were loaning their brand out to everybody else. So if you think about it, the ticketing data is at Ticketmaster, StubHub, and SeatGeek. The broadcast data is with NBC or ESPN or Hulu. The merchandise data is with Fanatics or New Era or Bauer. So they weren't getting a full picture of who their customers were. And we figured that, we could play a very important role in helping them identify who the future fan was. And we wound up calling them the fluid fan. And that definition is really stuck within the industry. A lot of people use that terminology. And I'll define it because it'll probably make its way into our conversation quite a bit. But the fluid fan is open to change, which means that they are willing to watch a Premier League game if they live in the US. They're a Bundesliga fan and they're watching the NFL. They want to seek out new experiences. So that's one part of the fluid fan definition. The other part of the fluid fan definition is that they're empowered to choose. They, as consumers, all have this in their fingertips at all times. And so they can choose whatever experience they want. They want to watch something in vertical. They can go on to TikTok and, Snapchat and all the different social platforms. They could be gaming on an Xbox or a PlayStation. So they can engage in different ways. So they're empowered to choose how they engage with a property or a brand. And then the final piece of the fluid fan definition is that they're constantly evolving. And this is the thing that drives our industry crazy because with every new technology, Apple releases a new headset, Meta releases a new headset, Cosm builds a new venue. There's all kinds of new ways to engage. So once you think you figured out what the fans want, they actually change their preferences and engage with the brand in a new way.
And one thing that always fascinates me with names, with terminology, do you remember how the idea of fluid came up? Do you remember the moment you said, yeah, we should call it fluid fan? I don't know. Sorry, that's my curiosity. I don't know if anybody cares, but I do normally.
Well, it was around 2017. The team was working on a number of different ideas, and basically, it actually mirrors society. Like that, gender definitions are fluid. There's a lot of ethnicity definitions that are fluid. Our own identity is tied to sports. So when I grew up, I was a Yankees fan and a Dallas Cowboys fan. And that was part of my identity. Like I wore the jerseys, I went to school, my friends know it, my college buddies still tease me about those teams, that's part of who I am. But I now love women's sports. I'm watching the WNBA constantly. I'm watching the NWSL. I partnered with a professional hockey player, and Angela got me involved in hockey. Yeah. And now I play hockey. Now I love hockey. Now I understand hockey. So my identity and my sports preferences have completely changed too. So I'm very fluid in what I like to consume on TV on the weekends.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at the industry now, what is where is your attention? Where is focus now?
Well, it ties back to what we figured out when we understood that people didn't know who the fans were. We figured out that if they didn't have the data to understand who their customers were, that one of the ways we could accelerate innovation across the industry was by providing them with that data. So we are a venture capital backed company. We used that investment to buy, license, and acquire unique data sources, right? So we know everything that consumers in the US spend their money on by using credit card and debit card information. We've used our brand and our reputation and our trust to bring in other data sets from youth sports organizations, fantasy sports organizations, sports betting, and media companies. So we are now taking all of that and putting it in what we call the sports data cloud. And that cloud, it's become sort of like this universal 360 view of what fans actually buy, where they spend their time and their money. And that helps organizations that only have ticketing information, or may only have merchandise information, or may only have concession information, really broaden what they know about those consumers, and get going with their strategic planning.
And how are you? So, who are your clients in this ecosystem?
Well, as you know, because you've been working in sports for a long time, the ecosystem is actually pretty diverse. So we service the entire ecosystem, and it makes sense that we do that, because the brands that sponsor teams want to know, are they sponsoring the right clubs? Are they on the right media platforms? So the brands are a very big part of what we do. So you have people in our ecosystem like Kellanova, you have people in our ecosystem like Intel and Visa, and the brands are all over our business. Then you have the agencies themselves. So we just did a big partnership with Dentsu. We've been working with Octagon for years. Those agencies want to know, are they writing the right campaigns? Are they building the right things? Are they doing the right media planning for their clients? We work with the media companies. We work with ESPN and NBC and all the different sort of platforms that are streaming this media, because they want to know, are they targeting those consumers with the right ads at the right time? And then the final piece, of course, is the teams in the league. So we do work with the NBA, with the NFL, with the NHL, and we've continued to do that, as we've been running our business over the last 7 years.
And not in a sporting sense, but if we look at the big US leagues, can you do for me a quick resume of what they're doing now? Because in the end, you think, okay, the NFL seems to be doing fantastic. From my point of view, which is subjective, and from your, obviously, I'm so immersed in American culture in general that I'm a bit there. 10% I'm there, but the NFL seems to be amazing.
I'm about 10%.
NBA seems innovating. I don't know. Tell me your take.
I'm about 10% on your side of the pond as well. I mean, so I think, look, here in the US, the priority is first party data. So the NFL is now starting their NFL ID. If you go to the NBA website, they have the NBA ID. If you talk to Major League Baseball executives, they're trying to create a player persona that they're calling the passport or something like that, and you're going to be carrying your player and fan profile with you. All of that urgency is around them owning their customer. So even if viewership is going down, or if it's staying flat, what they believe, and they're probably very right about this, is if they get a better picture of who their fans are, they'll have an asset in addition to their rights that is future-proofing their business. And I think that's why you see private equity getting involved in sports. I think that's why there's a tremendous amount of confidence that these media rights will hold their value over time. Because these are properties that do command the fans' attention and have a large number of opportunities to collect data from them.
And one thing that you could explain is not completely related to this. I think what would be useful to know on this side of the fund, what is the impact of NIL for college athletes? Can you quickly explain for everybody? And do you think it has an impact in the dynamics of the economics of the ecosystem?
Yeah, NIL is name, image, and likeness. And for those who aren't familiar with the way it works, is an athlete emerging from college and amateur sports wasn't able to make money off of their name, image, or likeness. So if you were an outstanding amateur or college football player, baseball player, or hockey player, you weren't able to make money until you went pro. And so that limited your opportunities to be economically successful. And if you didn't make it into the pros, you were really just, getting a free education or a subsidized education in the US. Now, name, image, and likeness rules have changed significantly. So as an amateur athlete, you can get endorsements. You can be paid for playing your sport much before you're actually a pro. And that has changed the way that brands actually think about this opportunity, because they can establish a relationship with an athlete at a very young age and actually be the brand that rides their success into the pros. And those types of partnerships, I think, are really, really valuable. Look, I mean, the biggest example of this is LeBron and Nike. Like, he did that very early in his pro career, and he's been loyal to that brand forever. That type of thing can actually happen at a much younger age. And you're seeing it already have ripple effects in college sports. The Tennessee Volunteers have recently done something called a fan tax, a talent tax. So they charge the fans additional 10% for tickets and other things, because they're trying to acquire more money so that they can pay the best talent to transfer to their programs. So it's actually very real. It's very starting to sort of get ingrained into the system from an economic standpoint.
But does it, with the huge impact, especially on that part of the population in terms of age, that social media now has, do you think there is also a dynamic where you may be more valuable in that sense, even if you're not the best player, because you're better, persona on social? Can it be somehow dangerous?
Dangerous, maybe. Certainly true.
Sorry, I meant gentle for the athlete themselves, that where they lost a bit.
Where they lose focus, or what?
Yeah, they lose focus. You think?
I don't know. I mean, I just think there's a reality that some of these athletes don't have the same economic. Look, take gymnastics. The LSU star Dunn. She was phenomenal at creating a social media persona, and she's made millions. And there's not a real, we talk about these, pathways for athletes. There's not a real strong pathway unless you're an Olympic gymnastics superstar. And then even then, you've got like every 4 years you can kind of. So anyway, she made a ton of money. There's some women basketball players in Miami that have done a phenomenal job, that have monetized themselves so well that they went back to playing. So there's something we see. Yeah, there's something we see with the younger athletes, that when they're savvy on social media, this name, image, and likeness thing is really an unlock for them.
Mm-hmm. Because one of the things we recently discussing in Europe with football players, because a lot of clubs, and when you see one, you see it's the crazy talent, 16 years old, playing Serie A, playing Premier League, playing La Liga. But when it's more team doing it, you start thinking, okay, there's a pattern. And it seems that the reason this is for the clubs, because they can then create more value on the players. So if obviously it has to be a big talent, but if you push up someone at 16, the value is increasing like a lot at an early age. So it seems more a club player value game than anything else. But in many sports, we see younger and younger athletes, I think.
I think it mirrors something you probably all also see in European football and in other sports. Here in the US, you get a player from Japan because you want to unlock the Japanese market. You get a player from, so I think what the younger players do is it unlocks that younger generation. So even if they're not the best talent, you want them in your system sooner. So I think you're appealing to a younger audience, and they're watching those players on different platforms, and they're engaging, and they're becoming a fan much earlier in their life.
And in terms of platforms, do you have an idea, again, without going too much in the media, but in social, what is? Do you see different kind of fans using different platforms, or no? It's like everybody use whatever platform, and all the sports are in all platforms, so it's quite even.
No, I mean, from our data, we don't follow like what apps people click on or how long they're on those apps, or we don't see what they search for. We're not a social media listening company. There are there are other companies that do that. What we see in the data is their subscriptions. So I know if they're subscribing to Hulu, Netflix, ESPN Plus, Fubo, Flow Sports, you name it, and that is very, very clear. I mean, most of the fans that are really strong fans for one league or another, they are actually maintaining 4 to 6 different OTT streaming platforms, and that's very expensive. And B, it reflects what the leagues are doing in terms of their rights. They're diversifying their rights because they can't make a one-horse bet, right? They can't be like, we're all in on ESPN. Apple was unique in the sense that they took MLS and they're like, MLS, no, that's it. But other leagues like the NFL, I mean, like Thursday Night Football is on Amazon, Tuesday Night Football somewhere else, Sunday Ticket somewhere else. So they're playing in all the ponds. So it's really interesting to see how that affects fan behavior in terms of how much they actually have to buy to follow the teams they want.
But so Steam, even if subscription fatigue is clear, especially I think I have 17 subscriptions, but obviously it's my job. So I think for sport maybe it's the one place where you still maybe not happy to do it, but at the end fans are doing it.
Especially if it connects with sports betting. That's where like you see the concentric circles. If you're a sports bettor, sports betting, sports streaming, they overlap, and you tend to have a large number of subscriptions. Excuse me.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's already valuable what we had. Is there any angle more in general that you want to cover on this, on sport in general?
Well, I think, again, like what we're seeing is this pattern in consumer behavior that the brands are paying a lot of attention to now, like the whole women's sports angle in the US. The data that we put out 3 years ago said that fans were really eager to watch women's sports. We could see that. We could see that they were on League Pass for the WNBA, and they were staying on League Pass after the season was over. We were seeing that they were buying merchandise from all these random places that you wouldn't assume they would buy sports merchandise from. Spotify and Shopify and off the podcasts and things like that. And they were like, well, why are they going from here to Fanatics, and why are they doing all this stuff? And then you could see that there wasn't enough inventory. So there's a large part of this, like the industry's catching up now with the demand that they're able to measure. And I think that intelligence hasn't been available to these guys in the past. They've been relying on Fanatics to tell them, like, what do fans want to buy? And now they're seeing in their own data, oh, we have an opportunity to release a new hoodie or a new sweatshirt or a new fashion line here. And I think that's going to diversify this industry even more than what we've seen in the past in terms of like what products and services they sell.
And I think, I don't remember everything exactly, but you remember the last FIFA World Cup women when the goalkeeper jersey was not, for England, I think, was not available at the beginning, which was a shame. Because, and it was, I think it was a brand, not an apparel brand that maybe, I don't want to say the name, that is wrong. And then basically the fans demanded, and in the end they did it. Yeah. Which for me, it was like, whoa, how can you do such a mistake?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the World Cup. I mean, so.
Yeah, I mean, the WNBA has been fighting with Nike for, almost the last 5 years here because they've had the really famous orange hoodie. We've fallen short on jerseys for Caitlin Clark. There's things like that are like very high profile news stories that really put an exclamation point on that.
Yeah. So acceleration of women's sport is real. Is not something we do because it's right to do. It's really happening.
And I think definitely happening. Plenty of examples around volleyball, hockey, every different sport. It's not just one. And it's really pushing up these valuations of these clubs, which again will let the players get paid more, fly on chartered jets instead of commercial, things like that.
And on the other end, sorry, what you think is the coming in the next few years? Do you have any sense? With not a prediction, but a scenario, if you want.
Yeah,
I know it's always difficult to ask.
No, I love talking to people like you who know the industry really well, because I think you can see the forces coming together, and the forces that are coming together mean that, like, we are going to have more and more personalized media opportunities, meaning that you're going to see something very different than I'm going to see if I'm watching the same two teams. Mm-hmm. And it's because you want to see more data on the screen than I do. You're going to want to hear different commentators than I do. I'm going to want to watch the game in silence because I'm usually watching it while I'm cooking, and I don't want to hear it. I want to be playing music. Like, there's different preferences that the brands and the media companies are going to get very, very good at understanding. And all this artificial intelligence, all this machine learning is going to be able to slice and dice the media in different ways, so that you and I are having a very different viewing experience, even if we're watching the very same game.
And just because you said that, I was thinking, would you say something that I've heard, not said in these terms, but there is a positive feeling about sport as a whole? Do you think sport is unbeatable?
I do.
In terms of whatever else is happening.
I do. I think it's ingrained in all of our cultures. I think if I were to go back to school and study this, I would do it from a sociological perspective, right? Because I'd be very fascinated in how generational fandom differs in different geographies. I think our fluid fan terminology works really well in the US. Mm-hmm. I think when you get into Europe, where these teams have been around 200 years, they've been playing forever in the local communities. Sometimes there's like that, look, I'll never not wear the red and white. I'll never not bleed, black and orange. Like, whatever it is, I think that there's a much tighter sort of cultural and local and even societal connection to those teams than we do in the US, where your players move around, so you move around. You're not a lifelong Yankees fan. You might be now a Mets fan because your favorite player moved. I just think that there's really interesting sort of historical views on fandom that make this fluid fan concept an actual fact that it's coming, but it's going to show up in different geographies and different societies, I think, at different rates.
I know my granddad was a Torino fan. My dad was a Torino fan. I am a Toro fan. My son is not.
That is exactly what that is. You've just described fluid fandom. Yeah, we believe, and we say this in the U.S. We say the diehard fan is dead, and the fluid fan is the future, right? Yeah. And I don't know that that's universally true, but I think it's actually a trend that everybody is acknowledging and recognizing as the future.
Maybe if you want, as you said, that the fluid fan has multiple dimensions of fluidity, in the sense of loyalty to a club, talking about football in Europe, I would say, but even maybe in other, but obviously the best example is football. Maybe that's still, for the young generation, the player, is maybe at the moment is playing in an academy for a certain club, so he became of that club. So I think it's more fluid in that sense for, I would say, a certain level of age. The old style loyalty is still there in Europe.
Yeah.
For the club, or for everything else, maybe we have similar fluidity, I think.
But if you love LeBron and you want to follow LeBron, do you wear his Cavaliers jersey, his Miami Heat jersey, his Lakers jersey? He's been a lot of places, right? So it's you're a LeBron fan. You're not following those teams as much. And that I think, again, I think that's the nature of the current sports economy, where transfers are more often. The players seek the highest salary, and certainly in college now, it even matters in the U.S. because the transfer portal means that this kid who got signed for the Georgia Bulldogs or for the Michigan Wolverines, he'll move. Like, if he gets a better deal somewhere else, he'll be playing for he could be playing for the team they hated, right? Like, he could go to the opposition, he could go to that rivalry, and that makes this really hard for fans to kind of get their heads around.
So it's fascinating years ahead of us, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a good business to be in. It's a rapidly changing industry. You want to be at the forefront of massive disruption and change because that's where real innovation happens, and I think that's where we're at.
So I think that's it. Fantastic final. Thank you, Josh.
You got it.